I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Always nice to have visitors. Yeah, so that's good. First item on the agenda this evening is the approval of the agenda. I do not have any changes. We have no changes, so I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Anderson, second by Munda. Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Walls?
Yes.
Mr. Munda?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
We have 5 yes, motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, then the next item on the agenda is our recognitions, and says we have a gift from the Chicago Bears.
We do indeed, I think, and I'm going to introduce Mark and Kim to step up, along with Scott Hagel, who, make sure I get your title right, Scott is the Vice President of Communications for the Bears, and obviously was a key point in making this happen on August 20th. So we're going to give a little presentation and talk, and
yeah, so I'll tell you a little story in terms of how this came about for us at the Bears. We've been looking for years to try to bring one of our practices to a community high school. We thought it would be a great experience for our players to get them back to the Friday night lights that they did growing up. But we also wanted to be a part and go into a community and celebrate Bears football together. So it took us a while to get this, and just over this last year, we talked to a number of schools, and let me tell you, the reception that we got from Warren was the reason why we picked to come to Warren Township. Wonderfully receptive from Mark and his staff. The Centennial we thought was a really neat thing to be a part of. We feel privileged to be a part of your Centennial. And we wanted to make sure that this was something that would work out great for not just our football team, but the community. And you all pulled that off. And hopefully what that's going to do is open the doors for us to do this in other communities moving forward. So on behalf of the Chicago Bears, we'd like to say thank you to the Warren Township Board. And we got a jersey and a football, and Mark was kind enough to spruce them up and make them look really good. And hopefully this will find a nice home for you guys at Warren Township High School to celebrate your centennial.
Wow.
Thank you. The signature is the head coach, John Fox, who was very happy with how the practice went. Again, we've got the 100 years. Yeah, we got the football as well to go with it. So again, hopefully that finds a nice home for you all. And again, thank you very much for your hospitality, making it a great night for us.
Oh. So, thank you very much. I just have one thing to say, is that there's really no reason to go to another school. Come on back.
I've been telling everybody that it was really
You don't really want to do
you don't
that.
want to do that.
Well, you guys set the bar very high.
Well, thank you.
So,
I
thank you very
appreciate it.
much.
Thank you.
Kim, you want to throw your picture?
Sure. We did sort of a compilation of some of the pictures that were taken by a few of us that were there, as well as the ones that were shared. Your people's like that are amazing. So we put together just a quick, there's not any music because I couldn't find a good version of
Figured out you got
not the version I wanted. And I wasn't going to try to borrow it from your website. Do we have to turn that on?
There you go.
Okay. All right.
So we can sing it.
Right leading up to the day, the weather was
Very, yeah,
very,
we're a
some of
little
the pictures,
sketchy.
even looking at some of it, it looks like it could have poured at any minute. There was some of our kids that were part of our grounds crew that helped with holding down the bear head. I recognize a couple of them. The kids had a great time.
I was saying, it cheerleaders and the band were a
They
big
had a
part for
great
us.
time.
We wanted to make sure that, our GM said, listen, I want the cheerleaders, I want the band there. We wanted this to feel like Friday nights.
So you had a great time,
Take
but
the
we tried
guys
to
back.
incorporate some of the, what you did at this event into some of our games too, because they really enjoyed every bit of it.
Yes, how long was the team on site? I wasn't.
For the practice, about an hour and a half is what our practice is. And they rolled in, we got right to work, signed autographs for about 15 minutes after practice, and then we get back and they go right to meetings.
It really was an awesome event, you know, and then you had that area for the younger kids that maybe wouldn't have the attention span to sit and watch this. That kids zone area was fantastic. There just was such a great sense of community. The families that were there really appreciated the experience. To be that up close to watch the players. I mean, you don't really have an opportunity to be that close unless you're in a special kind of an event like this. And it was fantastic. And the weather did cooperate in the end, which was so great.
Yeah, we ended up with a beautiful night, and I appreciate those comments. That's exactly what we're looking for. We want to be able to make sure you bring a unique experience to families that don't necessarily come down to Soldier Field. And again, it's important for us. We ask people to come to us a lot. We want to make sure that we can also go and be a part of the communities that surround the area that we play for.
Yeah, I thought it was a phenomenal event, and I was really proud to be a part of Warren as a board member and to just see this, you know, all the people who brought it together to bring it to the community and bring it, the people that were there were just beaming and smiling from ear to ear, whether it was the kids in the kids zone or the people at the concession stands, the people watching. My son went with a bunch of friends and they were bringing their things that they wanted to get autographed. It just was a fantastic event, and it was really, anybody that was there, you know, you really felt proud to be a part of it. And we were so happy to have you here.
Right. Well, thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you again. Like I said, I couldn't get a good version. Your website has a great version.
Thank you. Alrighty, we'll move along in the agenda then. The next item on the agenda is the reception of visitors. This is a part of the board meeting where people can speak to the board should they so desire. We have 3 minutes, so if anyone would like to address the board this evening? Okay. We'll move right along. We'll go to the president's report, which is we're talking about the dinner meeting schedule for 16-17 for IASB. There's 2 meetings scheduled. One is Wednesday, October 26th. They're covering disturbing the peace, handling community dissent in public schools at 5:45 at the Doubletree Hilton Libertyville Mundelein. So there's a registration starts at 5:45. And then March 8th in 2017, the Art of School Boarding, presented by Jim Burgett, president of the Burgett Group at North Chicago 187. 4:45 meeting and pre-meeting, and then 5:45 registration. So if anybody's interested in that, I'm sure we can. That's from Barb Tony, so I'm sure if anybody's interested, we can get. Is there a pre-registration for that, I wonder, or do you just register when you get there?
No, you need to
Pre-register so they know who's
let
coming?
me know and I'll make.
Okay. So anybody that wants to go, please.
I'll plan on attending as well, so just
Yeah.
any board members would like to go. Give Gina.
Okay. All right, that's good. And I don't really have anything else to report this meeting, other than I thought that I agree with everybody that the Bears day went very well. I was here, and it was just a fantastic event. People were so excited about it. It's just amazing. And they're so big. So big.
Thank you to everybody who brought it all together, it was a great event.
Even the Packer fans were excited.
Yeah, you saw Mr. Mao.
And the Bronco fans too, for that. Okay, so moving on to the committee report, we have a finance committee report.
We held a finance committee on August 16th at 5:45, which lasted till 6:30. I presented really overview of the tentative budget, talked about the process of the budget, explained some of the more important information that the board should be aware of in the tentative budget, on really how the budget would fall in line with the strategic plan that the board had approved. So there's specific details on what was accomplished in those minutes, and would entertain any questions or comments on the minutes, any changes?
Good, well, thanks again for the offline, and against Lake Forest, all right?
Not by me, since I wasn't there. And then we approve the final budget at the next board meeting.
That's correct.
It's been posted for the 30 days and so on and so on.
Yes, it's currently on public display.
Very good. Thank you, Carol. Are there any other questions about this? Actually, it's this year's budget. We're already in it, but,
That's right.
so we'll be posting that, and or be voting on that at the next meeting. And then, so move on to the superintendent's report.
Before we do have two presentations, short presentations, one by William, one by Carol. But I do want to give the board a few other general updates. First, we did have one FOIA since our last meeting from Mary Zellers at Impact Networking. She was looking for documents associated with our lease and service contracts regarding copiers and printing. I did want to just update the board that there is still a commission going on downstate regarding the evidence-based funding model. February 1st is the date that they're supposed to come out with some recommendation on what they're thinking. So there's still a lot of chatter about that, and I think that commission is actually working to make some determinations. I just wanted to update the board. February 1st is their deadline. We've been playing around a little bit about our strategic planning session in October. So I want to tentatively look for the board on your availability and or whether you think the following plan will work. We have a meeting scheduled for October 11th, our first October meeting. That was the date that we do have kind of settled in for our strategic planning. What we were thinking for that night is if we could get board members available as early as 5:30, what we were hoping to do is possibly have a regular board meeting from 5:30 to 6 o'clock here. The reason it's important that we may have a meeting that night is, number one, we do need to have the audit presented to the board, so we could have a short presentation on the audit, which usually doesn't take too long. And then we also want to make sure that we take the opportunity just to do some mundane business in regards to paying of bills and potentially some personnel issues and approval of minutes. So we're thinking between those couple of items and the presentation of the audit, we can have a short meeting between 5:30 and 6. And then what we're thinking of doing is inviting in our strategic planning group from last year, as well as some other individuals who've kind of joined our leadership team, from 6:30 to 8:30 in the library. We'd have dinner available from 6 to 6:30, whoever needs it, including the board, on your way down to that meeting. But we can have, that way we can, no longer than 2 hours, have a 6:30 to 8:30 strategic plan update on that evening. Sound like that would maybe be manageable? All right, we'll start sending out invitations to everybody that's involved in either one or both of those particular meetings. So thanks for that. And we have just an update. I don't know if I've talked to the board, or if Mary talked to the board even a while. They've had conversations for a while about the CLC, about their work and trying to continue their articulation with us and help support our students pre-K through, post-secondary. And so they're obviously the promise that President Obama talked about in terms of trying to make college accessible to everybody regardless of their financial situation. CLC has a foundation that's trying to help fund some of the costs that some of our students may not be able to afford. So their tentative plan right now is they're trying to use their foundation to raise enough money for those students who after they graduate from Warren attend CLC right away and would be in the lowest level of contribution level in terms of their own financial situations for college, because those are the students that, if you will get the most federal grant money. But they're at least starting there with trying to commit to early on getting in to see some of our seniors, having them apply early to CLC so that they can get paperwork done. And then what CLC's foundation is committed to is covering whatever cost their Pell Grant money doesn't. So I think it's about $9,000, or maybe it's $11,000 now that students might get for their education, and it usually costs more than that, if you will, a couple $1,000 at least more than that. And so CLC is trying to make sure that that's not the reason that those students don't go to school. So, and I think they're also trying to connect with those students as early as possible here through the college counselors, through their counselors, to make sure that those students don't get lost, in the spring, because that's one of the things that they found. That's a little frustrating, and I think in all the schools, some kids all of a sudden, come March, April, May, and they don't really have some solid plans like some other students might that are going to a four-year school, so next thing you know, they fall off the radar. They just want to put some securities in place to help those students. So I just wanted to update the board on what's going on at CLC. Also, we're into our centennial events. So today we had our centennial cross-country meet over at a plane. It is kind of nice. It does add some extra energy, a few extra visitors, and so that's kind of nice. And Kim's done a great job with some apps to give some kids some points for going to our events, and our administrators are trying to support that. So we're in the cross-country today. Tomorrow we've got volleyball, and we've got the Fill the Bucket in the evening for our band programs and our center districts band programs. And on Thursday we have tennis, right? And I think it's nice that I think Coach Cohen has always had the boys kind of support the girls program.
They're having a tailgate cookout.
Yeah, so they're having something in Mets gear, obviously, at the Ullman Courts. And then Saturday, we do have our Six Flags event, so that's coming really close, and we've been having weekly meetings with Six Flags, and it's going to be a good event for everybody who can make it, and we're just right now trying to remind people that it is this Saturday, and tickets are available, and we hope it's a great day for everyone. So there's a lot going on with the Centennial, and we're excited about that. So now I'm going to transition a little bit to different types of presentations, right? Really? I mean, I'll get you hooked up here. I'll be there. Willie's going to talk a little bit about, these are reports, by the way, that were part of our strategic plan to make sure that we report out to the board on some things. Thanks. Thank you. Next one.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay. So the para update, if you remember last year, we worked very diligently, the para committee. There was 4 union members, Jason Jackman, Nikki Thompson, Dave Zagan, and Andy Bonsher, and then 4 administrators, Dr. Algram, me, Pat Keeley, and Greg Meyer, and we worked very diligently on trying to find our student growth components so that could be implemented into the evaluation document for this year. So, on that student growth component, it was, classroom observation is still the 70% mark, or it is now the 70% mark, and then the student growth is going to comprise 30% of that evaluation document. So we decided to use our Explore Plan ACT, the growth of that, and there was a lot of reasons, and we did a lot of research from other districts, and when we talked to them, that was the piece that was damaging to some of those districts. Their PLTs kind of fell apart because you had competition between teacher and teacher. And that was one of our main things, was we wanted to make sure that we supported all of the good work we have been doing for the past 8 years on our PLTs. So we wanted to make sure that that was protected. So that's why we kind of chose the Explore Plan ACT. Everyone is invested in that student growth. Everybody is kind of on the same page. It doesn't matter what department you're from, if it's your core area or the non-core areas, they're all trying to get our ACT scores so that we can show growth through the Explore Plan ACT. I know you're thinking, now Willie, SAT is right around the corner, and we will get the para committee back together again. We can change SAT scores to ACT scores, so we'll do a lot of data analysis on that piece so that we have the information to make sure that if student growth is still going to be a part of it, we can transition to the SAT very easily. So with that student growth, it's going to be which students. So we had decided that all students in the class of 2017 that had an Explore score their freshman year and an ACT score their junior year. So that was last year. So we had to make sure that they were here for both of those tests. The other thing is we wanted to make sure we had students that were here 85% of the instructional time. We didn't want students that were gone 50% of the time because we didn't want those in our student growth. So those are the two things that we agreed on with our students. The assessments used, we have 2 assessments for the student growth component. Everybody has EPAS reading, so that's the Explore to ACT reading. And then EPAS, you have the English, the math, the science, and the composite. Those are your other test was one of those 4. So for English, the committee basically decided that they would have EPAS reading and EPAS English. That makes sense for them. For the math people, it was EPAS reading and EPAS math. Science, EPAS reading, and EPAS science. Now you have all the other departments where you're like, okay, it doesn't really match up with an ACT score. So we gave all of those departments an option. They could choose math, English, science, or composite. And so last spring, they all decided in April, whatever the majority of their department wanted. And all of them chose the composite. So for all of the non-testing areas, they have EPAS reading and EPAS composite. Now the reason we chose reading is we felt reading was the most important thing, and every student should be able to read, and it doesn't matter what course they're taking, they need to be able to read. So each department member would use the same 2 EPAS assessments. The student growth results, so as we analyze this, Explore to ACT growth for the class of 2017, English was 59%, so 59% of our students had our average growth. Math was 54%, reading was 64%, science was 64%, and composite was 66%. And just so you know, from previous years when we did this, these are the best numbers we've had. So that was very pleasing to us. So we are proficient in all of the categories. So for the 16...
What does the number mean, the 66%?
66% of the students made the growth target. Okay? Okay. So for the 16-17 school year, the principals will embed the class of 2017 student growth EPAS scores into the evaluations for the 16-17 school year. So they will, and their teams will have all of those embedded, and we did a lot of work in the summer to make sure the forms were all matching. Our juniors, which are the class of 2018, will take the ACT plus writing this April. If you remember, we were going to be paying for that, so that we have 1 more year of growth with the EPAS. So when 17-18 rolls around, we'll have the same data. And then juniors, if you remember, will also take the SAT test in early April. That date is April 5th. And that is, I found out today, it is a graduation requirement, and it is a requirement before they can be a senior. They have to take that SAT test, or SAT plus writing. And the other thing I wanted to point out is last year's administrative evals and this year's administrative evals all have that student growth component, and we're using the same growth as what the teachers will be using. Questions?
Just qualification, when you say juniors taking the SAT, does that mean that they're in their junior year or that they're a certain number of credits?
We define them as having a certain number of credits, so it's however the local school defines that. And we give them until the second semester to earn those credits.
We were just having that conversation yesterday about what does it mean, because sometimes you get sometimes juniors, but don't necessarily have the 11.5 or.
Correct.
Or is that what we've got here?
Is it, I don't, yes, yes. And then we have to have them in specific areas. So they have to have 2 in English and 2 in math and 2 in science. And so,
Well, can you go back to the slide with the 85% participation?
sure. Oh, I missed it. There.
Okay, students that are here 85% of the instructional time, so what makes up the other 15?
They are
They're
absent.
absent.
So on a regular basis, they're absent?
15% of the school year.
Really?
Yes.
That's not 85% of the students. The students have to be here 85%.
5% of the
How
time
many
to be
students?
counted.
What percentage of students miss 15%?
So you may have a student that has an involvement in the community and he's detained and he's not in school.
Okay.
So that would, if he's not going to be in
Or out
attendance.
on a medical?
Well,
Correct,
Right, yeah.
right,
Medical.
absolutely.
Okay.
We did have to take kids out because of those reasons, so, yeah, I
Okay.
don't remember how many, but
Okay.
we had to take
Up
some.
to you.
All right, I think Carol is up. Well, look at that, beautiful. Here's mine, plain and very simple. Okay, and then we have Carol's, very colorful. Very
Well, can you go back one slide just for a
Yes,
second?
I'd
I
love
do
to
want
make one
to
slide.
remind the board, right now, if you hear, from a board level and administratively, the state superintendent and his representatives are right now doing a listening tour,
Yes.
listening
Yes.
tour for the Every Student Succeeds Act. Meaning, that like they, with NCLP, right, they came out with a platform of NCLP and then went around and created the mandates that fit under there. The Performance Evaluation Reform Act was one of those. And so, you know, right now, the state, when NCLB was no longer in place, in theory, right, there was no longer a mandate to do para, right, to do the student growth as part of teacher evaluation. But the state had already committed to it by law, by our own Illinois legislators, and I think everybody realized there have been a lot of, when you ask people about, are we staying with this, because some other states got out, people put incredible work into this process of developing good assessments or identifying what assessments truly match the growth that they're trying to get out of kids. So at least for now, I know that, you know, the message has been, look, we're committed to this until either some things happen where we're not anymore, right? And I don't know what that means, other than the fact that it will be an ongoing topic over the course of the next year, of whether or not districts are going to continue to be mandated to use this. So.
Or, you know, Charlotte Jamison had her hands in a lot of this, and she's now becoming very vocal that some of her ideas were really taken and kind of guided in a different direction by some of our legislators, if I'm correct,
Yeah,
Willie.
you are correct.
And she's now coming out and saying, you know, what I had intended is not really what's being enacted. And I want to back off from that because that's not the path that I intended to go down, but that is not the path. I think that's an important piece because she was instrumental in you know,
Right.
pushing this forward, which there are some very good pieces to it, but somewhere along the line, some others got their hands involved in the kitchen.
Shocking.
And obviously, the unions
Something
have,
different.
right, I mean, you guys know that the IA and IFT are a player in all this, right, in terms of how their teachers are evaluated. So, you know, at the state level, they've been, when it was a mandate, they were kind of on the sidelines with it. It'll just be interesting to see what happens as we go through the year and what kind of eruptions happen or don't happen.
State mandates at 50%, isn't it?
If you can't come up with a plan, it's 50%. We came up with a plan, it's 30%.
We'll keep the board updated if we start to hear any changes to this too. And our parent committee continues to meet, and that's thanks to Willie's commitment to bring all this together.
I don't think anybody wants to hand it something you put that much time in, plus I think it's a good message to our parents and families too, that we're taking that seriously, that, you know, it's not gonna be just everybody gets whatever. There is a performance metric to it, which is, and it has to be fair, obviously. I mean, it's a very difficult thing to measure, but I like the fact that there's something there.
Accountability. Yeah, I agree with you, John. The other thing is, you know, if we're talking about our strategic plan and we talk about student achievement and rigor and those type of things, You have to be able to measure it, and
Right.
so here you go, you know. I
You
agree.
can only improve what you measure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Carol, totally changing the subject.
Totally changing.
And she's
So
wearing
it's
flowers.
correct.
Are you
I
Carol?
am, because I'm, nature is my nature. I share things. One of the very important goals for 16-17 is exploring the feasibility of moving toward green building initiatives. And this is very important to not only the district, but to all of us that, you know, have generations to come. It's very important that we reduce our carbon footprint. It's very important that we look for initiatives that, you know, help us contain costs and to be a very efficient user of energy in the future. So we have been working on that process. We still have a ways to go, but I wanted to go through some of the initiatives that we have started and are working on 16-17. We've really got 4 initiatives going right now. One is an LED lighting project that we just finished. Another one is a wetlands project that I'll talk more about. That one has been started and the board we presented that to the board previously. Talk about our solar initiatives and how our feasibility study by our new architects is really going to help us to bring a lot of these pieces together. In fiscal year 2016, we installed 619 LED motion sensor lights in the Almond Gym, emergency areas, field house, wrestling room, cafeteria, hallways. At Oak Plain, we installed the lights in the parking lot, main gym, auditorium, and field house. I'm really happy to say that since Router has released their DCEO funds, we are getting a check for $96,460 from the DCEO grant, and we also applied for a grant from the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation and have received that check for over $76,000. The total cost of this project after rebates was $117,000, or $189 per light fixture. The payback period on this initiative is less than a year. So if you go into our gyms right now and nobody's in there, the lights are off. As soon as you walk in there, the lights are on. The lighting is so much better and so much more energy efficient. So it was a leap of faith to get the DCEO funds, but we did get those. And we moved forward with that and worked with our vendor to get that accomplished. And I do have pictures here of the lighting in the cafeteria and lighting in the gym. So it's a reduction of 510,000 kilowatt hours per year for LED lighting. So significant, a significant reduction of our carbon footprint. Our second initiative is the wetlands project. And this project has been, I think a year or two ago, the board approved the project to use Wetlands Restoration Inc. to restore Gow Beach to a natural wetlands for use by really students and the community to study native wetlands in our area and to be able to enhance nature at the Oak Plain campus. The project would be paid for by pollution abatement credits, which enhance the environment. The Water Reclamation District has to buy so many pollution abatement credits. It's mandated, and they would be buying them from us and funding this project. I just talked to the group. They're set for hopefully approval in March from the Army Corps of Engineers. We modified our plan so we had a little less berm area around the kind of Gow Beach Creek area, so we made sure we didn't interfere with any of our PE or practice space, which is why the project went back to the Army Corps of Engineers. Wetlands Restoration would like to present to the staff at the Institute Day in January. What they'd like to do is talk about the project. They really want the students and staff involved in assisting with the planting process, in learning from this, and to continue learning from not only what a wetlands means, but historically how the Indians, really the Native Americans, would grow their food from the wetlands. So it's not only science, it's history, it's math, it's English, and this group really hopes to engage the staff, which is why they'd like to talk to them in January, and just present the possibilities. The other piece we want to incorporate in here is a small solar project where we would use solar energy to run pumps, to run electricity, to run the electricity to the space in the outdoor classrooms, which would be the existing buildings that are already there. So we would start with a very small solar project. Now, solar initiatives. Lake County, first of all, has not passed an amendment to have a solar field in the unincorporated areas of Lake County, so the areas that Lake County has jurisdiction. Recently, Grace Lake High School got approval from the Village of Grace Lake, a special use permit, to install solar rooftop panels. The district Grace Lake is going to pay for them directly rather than using an outside partner. They're borrowing $5.9 million, it's supposed to be a $9.6 million savings over 25 years. And then they would eventually sell some energy back, is their plan. We're going to be able to learn a lot from what Grace Lake High School does. And even though I know we would like to be one of the forerunners in, not only rooftop solar, but field solar, we may be able to really learn a lot from our nearby high school to make really the best decisions. There is a lot of differences of opinion on, from a cost-effective standpoint, how cost-effective solar is. Right now, what we're seeing is, a year or two ago, there were more grants available for solar power, and those have dried up. So we went through actually 3 bid periods to try and get money. Some high schools did get a small amount of money to start some projects, high schools and grade schools, but we unfortunately weren't one of those. So the other opportunity that this gives us by the delay is we can have our architects really evaluate the roofs before we put any existing structures on those. So we will have the roof evaluated through the feasibility assessment that DLA is doing. So that brings me really to my last point in this, in our initiative, and that's to use our new architects. The board has engaged them to do a feasibility study. We hired them because I think creativity was, a major factor. So we want to use their creativity and their knowledge to see what we can do on a green basis. And that could be solar panels. That can be, Chicago is filled with green rooftops. I mean, there's probably many, many things that the architects can come up with for us that will really make this a well thought out, comprehensive plan. And I'm very excited that we've got these things started early in 16, 17, and I hope by the time we wrap up the year that we've got more information to really make some very good choices for Warren Township High School, and really to instill home to our community, our staff, our students, the importance of being good environmental stewards. Any questions that I can answer from the board?
Can you address that Lake County?
Yes. Yeah, so Lake County, they have a Unified Development Ordinance, it's called a UDO. In that UDO, they do not specifically provide for the installation of solar panels in fields. So they started out about a year ago and were charged with developing an amendment to the Unified Developer Ordinance to specifically provide for a solar field. Now, one of the ideas we had tossed around was solar panels on our property on Sturt School Road, as a thought. Well, that's an unincorporated, that would fall under Lake County's jurisdiction. So in order to, successfully move forward, we would want that amendment in place that would specifically provide for a solar field. Indiana does it now. Don't have a lot of knowledge about what other areas are doing, but the Grays Lake Initiative is 2.5 acres. So, but that was in the village of Gurney's Grays Lake's jurisdiction. So Grays Lake could approve that special use permit. Any other questions?
Which campus did they put in the?
They are doing it on both north and south, or north and central, I'm sorry. North and central's campuses, and they would have 1,920 panels on central's roofs, 2,245 panels on north roofs, and one newspaper article said 25 acres, the other one said 2.5 acres for field panels, for field panels, which would be a phase 2 for them. So when we originally looked at this, our panels on our roofs, which each one of our buildings is about 400,000 square feet, so not quite as much rooftop space, we would be able to generate about 25% of our energy needs through solar panels. So at that time, we would not be a seller of energy, we would just be a user of energy. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Kara?
Thanks.
Thanks, John. Question regarding, what's the initial reaction that regarding food service thing?
Yeah, we can, if anybody wants to weigh in regarding food service. I think people have noticed, I think people have noticed the quality of food, first and foremost. I think they've seen an upgrading the quality of food, obviously, at both campuses. Here, there wasn't an initial issue with lines or the service lines. It just took a plane a few days to, reconfigure some things and get the kids squared away on the best way to go through the cafeteria. But as far as we know, things are going.
And kids enjoy the food court options, where they're able to just move from place to place rather than segmented. They've enjoyed the increased number of choices that they've had. So at least initial comments are very positive.
We're just finishing up installing the remainder of the new equipment that we're putting in. We're fully operational, but we've put in, or the vendor has paid for quite a bit of new equipment. We're still waiting for the grills to, they're in, we just have to upgrade the ventilation systems there. So that's the last component of this. And they are very eager to start the food service committees. So we're still in the ramp up stage at this point, but I think generally it's been more positive feedback. The coffee and latte, frappuccino, smoothie area is quite busy. So
Frappuccino.
absolutely.
Give us more caffeine.
The lattes are very good. So, So, we're not quite there yet, but we're moving, I think, in a very good direction. So I'm very excited to hear what, get some feedback from the students.
Very good, thank you. Okay, you're all done, John? All right, well, we'll move right along to the facility use waiver for the Relay for Life, June 10th and 11th of 2017.
Michelle's here from Relay for Life.
Hi, Michelle.
How are you doing?
Good.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I am Michelle Rain Shepherd, and I'm a volunteer representing the American Cancer Society's Relay for Life of Vernon Wattsburg. Okay. So first, we want to thank you for allowing us to use the facility this past year. Actually, in July we used it, and we raised over $109,000. Of course, just in case you don't know, the funds that are raised, it goes toward providing wigs during chemo treatment, free rides to treatment, as well as there's cancer research that the funding goes toward, and paying for lodging when you're away from home. So, getting treatment, of course. So that's also what the society is doing. So, of course, 2017 will be our 15th year that we are participating in Relay for Life here in Vernon Wattsburg. Needless to say, we are requesting use of the Warren High School Almond campus this year. Not even this year, but next year, 2017, June 10th and 11th, through the 11th. We are requesting use, as well as we're requesting a facility use waiver. So we hope you consider that and approve it. Do you guys have any questions for me?
I don't have any questions.
So it's been a great partnership with the high school. And, glad to have you.
So, so it's June 10th and 11th?
Yes.
Okay. It just says 9th and 10th, so we just switched that. Okay.
Ninth
Yeah, I was just checking the,
9th through the 11th.
it's 10th and 11th.
10th or 11th.
Yeah.
Good.
It's a great thing.
Thanks for what you do.
We need a motion for the 10th and 11th.
I'll move to approve a facility use waiver for Relay for Life on June 10th and 11th, 2017.
Second.
Roll call.
I have a motion by Munda and a second by Walls. Mrs. Conway?
Absolutely, yes.
Ms. Campbell?
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. Munda?
Yes.
Mr. Walls?
Yes.
And Mr. Anderson?
Yes,
I have 5 yes.
all good, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You want to take my daughter home?
Yes.
She waited.
So much.
Deserves an award.
You know what I
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now that the Bears are going, I can say go Broncos.
Yeah, we have our coach. Good night.
All right, so,
Good time.
speaking of PMA, there she is.
All right.
Come on up.
Sure.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you, timing is everything. We're on the right moments.
Exactly, perfect timing.
You got ESPN.
Well, thank you for having me tonight and the opportunity to talk with you about an opportunity for the district to refund some more of its bonds. You may recall that we had this conversation almost exactly a year ago about some other bonds, and you subsequently did a refunding in late 2015 and saved on debt service payments and ultimately provided savings for taxpayers. Thank you. So we're going to talk about another opportunity tonight and some things actually that'll come kind of in steps over the next year or so. So let's go right into the presentation. This is crazy. I don't expect anybody to be able to read this up here, but this is, if you want to have one place as a board to go and look at all the debt service payments that you have on your bonds against your EAV or your equalized assessed value and your projected tax rate, this is the place to look. So this represents the payments that you have, and the yellow line going across shows the levy for 2015, and those are payments you're making then in the current fiscal year. And we're going to focus
tonight mostly on bonds that are on a non-referendum basis. I'll talk more about that in a minute. And the middle of the page deals more with your bonds related to referenda that the district has passed in recent years. And then ultimately we have your total payment of debt service is about 6.8 million and against an EAV of about 1.9 billion. Your bond and interest tax rate, or the portion of a tax rate on a homeowner's tax bill, is about 36 cents. And depending on the EAV growth of the district, that tax rate is going to change from year to year. The payments that you have on file for your bonds with the county clerk, those don't change unless you as a board do something to change them. Either issue new bonds, refinance, or refund the bonds that you have. I'm going to go right to this next chart because part of our discussion tonight is going to talk about how you might refund some of your non-referendum bonds, not only saving taxpayers dollars, but providing future boards with flexibility. So this is looking at both referendum and non-referendum bonds. The light blue bars on the top of the chart represent your payments that are outstanding for referendum-related bonds. The dark blue bars at the bottom represent payments that are for non-referendum bonds. And there's a green line going across, and that represents your debt service extension base, or your D7. And you may recall from conversations we've had in the past that if you have a debt service extension base as a school district that's tax capped, which you are, your annual debt service payments for non-referendum bonds in any given year cannot be more than the D7, as we call it, or that green line going across. So what this shows you, and our conversation tonight is going to be on that green line going across and the dark blue bars below it. Right now, your current payments are such that you have payments going through levy year 2026, meaning you've extended debt and structured payments right up to the cap of that D7. So what can we do when we look at refunding bonds today that are part of the blue bars that, again, save dollars, but also provide flexibility for the district going forward? Again, more small numbers, but the point of this chart is to try to identify where might there be refunding opportunities for the district. So any bond issue, they all have numbers, and those represent below them the principal payments on bonds that you have. Any maturities that have boxes around them, that means those are payment amounts that can be called in or refunded for present value savings. So when you as a board originally sold bonds and assigned a call feature to them, you told investors down the road, we might want to have the opportunity to refund bonds and either restructure them or generate some savings, locking a lower interest rate down the road, okay? Now, the columns that are shaded in yellow and also have boxes around them, those are bonds that have call dates coming in pretty quickly. So that's really what the impetus of this discussion was tonight, keeping an eye on those and saying we're getting close to a point where the board should have a discussion, seeing where the market is, are you interested in refunding them? And we had this conversation last year that the IRS has rules about how you can refund tax-exempt bonds for savings, and there's two ways. One is called an advance refunding. So example of that would be a few years ago you sold some bonds for capital projects for what we call new money purposes. And now we are in 2016 and you might want to refund those bonds. But the call date might not be for several years down the road. The IRS says you can do that. You can refund them today even though they're not technically callable for a few years. Because when you sell the bonds today, you take your bond proceeds and you put it into an escrow and it earns interest until the call date, and that's when the investors are paid off. But the IRS says you can take that one bite at the apple now, but if you do it, you cannot refund the new bonds that you just issued until you get closer to the call date in what's called a current refunding. And that means you have to make sure it's within 90 days of whatever the call date is. And that will become more relevant in a second when we look at the purposes of your 2007 and your 2008 bonds. And just as a reminder, there's different industry benchmarks that we look at. When does it make sense for a board to contemplate a refunding? And typically, if you have present value savings that are net the cost of issuance, that are at least 3%, typically at least between 3 and 5% of the principal amount of the bonds that you refund, then it means you should take a look at the numbers and see what you think. So that's really why we're here tonight, and you'll see in a minute that we're certainly above that target. just want to focus for a second on the interest rate environment. So we've looked at this chart, I know, many times, and the different colors represent different points on the yield curve. And this is called the MMD index, or the Municipal Market Data Index. So it's an amalgamation of AAA rated municipal bonds throughout the country. Okay, so whether you're a school district in Illinois or a different type of unit of local government anywhere in the United States, your bonds are going to sell relative to or to spread to what's going on in this index. We follow this index very closely from day to day. So again, the red line at the top is a 20-year bond. It goes to 5-year increments at the bottom, where the blue line is a 1-year bond. So if we look over on the right-hand side where we are, and obviously we're at just about the lowest point we've been in the last roughly 26 years or so. And if you look at where you sold bonds in 2007, 2008, certainly rates were quite a bit higher than they were today. So the general rule of thumb is when you're going to look at refunding some bonds, you want rates to be at least 100 basis points or at least 1% lower than when you originally sold them. So just glancing at the chart, the index tells you you're certainly at least that much lower than when you sold your bonds. Okay? And I certainly don't have a crystal ball that works, but we are anticipating a continued strong market. But knowing that there's a presidential election in a couple months, we anticipate that depending on who's elected into office, it could cause some volatility in the market. So another reason we're having this conversation tonight is we're motivated to try to potentially lock in some savings for the district here before the election on November 8th. So I won't bore you with all the details on this chart, but I want to highlight a couple things. Because we talked about advance refunding versus current refunding, we have to be mindful in your case of the importance of the purpose of the bonds that you sold in 2007 and 2008. Bottom line is both transactions were kind of a combination of transactions. So for 2007, it was for advance refunding previously issued bonds, okay, and for working cash. There were two purposes. So as a result, the IRS says, if you want to refund some of those 2007 bonds today, because of these rules, you can only advance refund 74% of them right now. You can refund all of them when it's a current refunding a year from now, but you can't refund all of them today on a tax-exempt basis if you wanted to. And the average interest rate, by the way, on the callable bonds is just over 4%. On the 2008 A bonds, it's a similar story in that you had a working cash fund and you advance refunded other issued bonds in the past. So again, we have to look at this formula from the IRS, and about 60% of the bonds can be refunded on an advance basis, and all of them can be refunded next fall. So we have to, again, be mindful of what these rules are, because ultimately in our plan for potentially generating savings for the district and taxpayers, we have to be very purposeful about how we put all this together. So we ran a scenario here for you, again, to show you what type of savings you might generate in the current market and how it might provide the board and district with flexibility down the road. We've used current rates plus 25 basis points, or 0.25%, to be conservative. So what we're doing in this transaction, again, this is a refunding of the 2007 bonds, and it's what we're calling a deferred savings approach. And you can kind of see it on the right-hand side where it says savings in that yellow shaded column. You'll see the first few years, there's really no savings at all. In fact, there's a slightly negative number in the second year. That's because we're just trying to get things as close to zero as possible. We have certain constraints we have to work with the numbers. But basically, it's, for all intents and purposes, the first 4 years you have no savings. And then you see it starts to pick up, it jumps to $55,000. And that's what it is for the life of the bonds. In this structure, we're not extending the payments that you have on those 2007 bonds that we refund. And by the way, it's just under $5.2 million that we would refund, because that's 74% of the bonds you can refund from 2007. And the total savings is listed there at about $400,000, and on a present value basis, it's about $345,000. When you take that number and you divide it by the principal that you refund of almost $5.2 million, you get about 6.7% present value savings. Again, that number is net of the costs of issuance. So you can see we're above that 3 to 5% minimum threshold that we talked about. I mentioned earlier that the call date on these 2007 bonds isn't until 2017. So we want to when you think about refunding bonds, there's two things. Again, are rates lower today than when you originally sold the bonds? And how far are you away from the call date? Because the closer you are to the call date, the more efficient it is, meaning it doesn't cost the district quite as much money as if you, let's say you were 5 years away from the call date, because you have to generate more dollars to fund the escrow. So we want to make sure, if we can, to minimize what's called this negative arbitrage, because the IRS says there's a maximum rate when you do a refunding bond issue and you're generating those proceeds and you're putting into an escrow. The IRS says we're going to set forth a maximum rate of interest that you can earn in that escrow. And per this transaction, this set of numbers we ran, it's the bottom line where it says a legal constraint of 1.86%. So again, that's saying that's the maximum rate of interest for the escrow. In the current environment though, because you're restricted as to the type of investments you can put in the escrow, they're called these state and local government securities, which are basically U.S. Treasury securities that are made available every single day. We know the good news is on the borrowing side rates are low, but as Carol knows, they're very low on the investment side. So we can only get about 57 basis points, even though we know we could get 1.86% if we could find it somewhere in the market through a U.S. Treasury security. So the difference between those two rates of about 1.3% is called negative arbitrage. Okay? Because you can't get that maximum rate, you need some more dollars to fund the escrow. And that negative arbitrage number is quantified, that figure of about $73,000. In other words, if you could get the full 1.86% in the escrow, that negative arbitrage number would go away because it's as efficient as possible, and that $73,000 number would come back here. Instead of having present value savings of $345,000, we add about $73,000 to it. So this number is already net of the negative arbitrage figure. But I wanted to mention it because we don't have a call date until early 2018, meaning the soonest you can refund these, all of the bonds, is the fall of 17. That's when the escrow would be the most efficient. It's a year from now. And that'll be relevant in a minute again when I talk about, well, what if you do this now? What if you waited a year? What, you see where I'm going, where the market may go. What's the break-even point? I'll talk about that in a minute. So the other portion of the possible transaction in 2016 is what if we refund some of those bonds from 2008 while we're at it? We're trying to maximize opportunities and make sure this whole plan fits. It's smaller because we're not refunding as much bonds this year. Your total savings is about $70,000. On a present value basis, at the bottom though, you can see it's over 10%. Again, part of the whole plan to ultimately refund both series of bonds, all the callable bonds that we can. We have some negative arbitrage. It's small. It's only about $8,000, but again, that's because we're over a year away from that call date, and it's not as efficient as it would be as if we waited a year from now. Okay? So again, it begs the question, we know where we are in the current market, we know there's good savings, we know there's some negative arbitrage, but what if rates stayed the same and we waited to refund all of these bonds until the fall of 2017, again, rates staying the same, would we be better off? And the answer would be yes, but how much do rates have to go up over the next year that you would be better off refunding as we've laid out in this plan today? And that's presented in a minute. I'll get to that in a second. So at the end of the day, what we want to do is tee up the rest of the refunding, right? So we've refunded good chunks in 2016. Now we're going to do some more in 2017, sort of the balance, if you will, which between the two transactions that are left, it's about $4 million that we refund. And here, and you can see the savings look kind of interesting, right? It's not this pretty picture where everything is even or gradually increasing. We have some ups and downs. We've got several years kind of block in the middle with some decent savings, but the last 2 years there's actually negative savings. And you'll be able to see in a minute with the overall plan why we're doing that. But in the aggregate, it does generate total savings, although it's only about $25,000. It generates present value savings of $250,000, or about 6.2%. Okay? And again, this is based on current rates plus 25 basis points. So, to the question about back to the question, what's that break-even point? So in other words, for the 2007 bonds, if we waited a year, how much do rates have to go up? Would be better off doing this plan today? And the answer is 40 basis points, 0.4%. For the 2008 piece, there we go, okay. It's only 30 basis points. So really the question for the board is what your risk tolerance is, and if you believe rates could go up by more than 40 and 30 basis points respectively based on this plan, then we would advise that you lock in some refunding today, and then we'll be back next summer and fall to talk about refunding the balance, make the overall plan fit. Because we have an end goal here, which I'll show you. Thank you, okay, great. So this is similar to the chart you saw at the beginning, but we're only looking now at just the non-referendum bonds. We don't see the bars on top of the green line because that's not, in terms of our total analysis, it's not part of what our ultimate goal is. So if you look at, again, green bar going across represents the DSED, okay, that's increasing at a rate over time. You've got blue bars which show your existing non-referendum debt service payments. Again, you could, as you saw earlier, you were extended all the way through levy year 2026, meaning you don't have the capacity to issue non-referendum bonds for different purposes and put any payments until you get to 2026. So our goal here is to structure these refundings in 2016 and 2017 that we do save the district dollars. We also create some room in the DSED sooner and give the board flexibility. So if you look at this, you can see beginning in levy year 2019, see the red bars? That's what our new structure would look like. We're really not changing anything for levy years 2016 through 2018 because we're purposely trying to generate some savings in the middle of the structure. So again, if in a few years the board has needs or something it needs to do, it has that capability to do that. It does stretch out payments into levy year 2027, but the main message is you have flexibility down the road to sell non-referendum bonds if you needed to at some point sooner. But in the interim, you generate savings for taxpayers and create flexibility for the district. Okay, everybody see that?
So I think the main message from, what John, Dr. Albrum and I have talked about, and we've done this with the board before, is that doing an advanced refunding now saves over $403,000 to the taxpayers. That was our first thought as we went through this process. The availability and flexibility of borrowing in the future is something the board would make a decision on later. It's not a decision you're making now. You're really making the decision on whether we would do the refunding, pass on, or have the about $403,000 net present value savings that would go on the next levy. So we would go to the county right away as soon as this, transaction would happen, and the taxpayers would actually see that on their next bill. So that was paramount to us. Really kind of the icing on the cake is the secondary piece, which is the availability to borrow if the board wants to possibly speed up some maintenance projects that it wants to do or whatever might happen. So.
And that's a decision we have to vote on when we get to 2018 or 2019.
Right.
Or 2019 really,
Right.
That's the first one where there's room based on this process.
Well, we'll come back, we would come back, Tammy would come back in 17, and then we'd revisit this. But right now, the primary issue is, do you want to refund the 2007 portion that's refundable, the 2008 portion that's refundable, for a net present value savings that is a minimum of 3%, hopefully at the 6 or 7% or greater target that the market indicates right now. And what we would do is, I know Tammy's got the timeline, she'll talk about where we go from here.
Thank you. So we would come to the board at your September 27th meeting with two resolutions. One's a parameters resolution, which you've adopted this type of resolution before, which as it sounds sets forth certain parameters, meaning this is the maximum amount of bonds we're authorizing, this is the minimum savings target. Most importantly, it names a couple delegates to authorize the final sale results. So it's typically the board president and a member of the administration, because we have to have their verbal and written approval on the day of the sale. So that's key. And the other one is an escrow resolution that just describes the terms of the escrow that I talked about a little bit earlier. We would clip along at a pretty quick pace, as I mentioned earlier, because we do want to try to get into the market before the election. So we would have to go through a credit rating process with the administration. They've done that before, so it's really kind of an update that you have to get a separate credit rating every single time you go into the market. Get that done by the 3rd week of October, and really be teed up to price right on the 1st of November probably. Close that transaction, and as Carol said, come back to you next summer and say, you know, here's what the market looks like now, here's the plan, let's revisit it. Are you ready to move forward with the 2017 refunding with the structure that we talked about in 2016, and hopefully get that transaction underway at that time.
I got a question.
Uh-huh.
From the outset, I believe you mentioned that you only have one bite at the apple.
Mm-hmm.
What is the revisiting a year from now?
Sure, okay. So for the 2007 and the 2008 bonds, we're not refunding all of them today in 2016. So the piece that's left, it's about $4 million of principal between the two series we're not doing now because of those IRS rules. So the second piece in 2017 is what's left.
Get closer to the call date, and we can go ahead and sell the rest of it without penalty.
If it's within 90 days of the call date, then you get to do it at that point.
Right. You can
So,
actually, right.
It's not just, that one, it doesn't matter if it's only one bite at the apple, because you're within the
Right.
call date.
Right. So we'll, we'd come back in August, we'd actually try to tee it up to maybe price as soon as mid to late September of 2017, and close it in October, which meets that 90-day requirement.
Yeah, so we really don't decide on the 2017 now, we're really just gonna, at the next meeting, vote on the 16 ones, or the 16, it's the 7, and part of the 7 and part of the 8.
That's correct.
70% and 60%, as I recall, generally speaking.
Yes.
So we're gonna do that, and then bank that money, get the savings, and then decide what we're gonna do in 17 based on the market at large.
That's correct.
Okay?
And then Ms. Campbell had brought up a different issue, looking at a larger issue of refunding in the future. And you'll see by Tammy's one chart, there's several callable bonds. You'll see boxes around those. Those are always future opportunities
Right.
to hopefully, if the interest rate market is favorable, to get more savings for the taxpayers and do more refunding.
Our more recent bonds that we've issued for the construction stuff, though, were done later when interest rates were down, I believe, so they're a little bit
Right,
lower.
Right.
So there may not be that opportunity, but the interest rates may have popped up, and we just don't know. It's too far out.
Right.
And I imagine when next August, we're talking about the 2017 transaction refunding, we'll probably start to talk about the next big chunk that's callable from the 2009 issue, because that has a call date in January 2019. So it will be appropriate to start introducing
We see
some of
what
those.
the numbers look like.
Yeah. So it's good to take a holistic approach, right? And the big picture, not just one transaction at a time.
Yeah, it certainly seems like a great idea to me. I think there's no question it saves money and it improves flexibility, because you just don't know what's gonna happen, 4 or 5 years from now.
So really, the board is taking no action tonight. The next action would be at the next board meeting, where you will be asked to approve 2 resolutions.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll move right along. is the designation of local election official representatives for the April 4th, 2017 consolidated election. So we usually have school officials hand out the paperwork, right? Jean Love, and who else? Is that it? Oh, John Alden, right? Dr. John. Okay. Seems like it works.
Yeah, I'm good with it.
But is it a motion, or is it just to say, go ahead? I don't see a motion in here.
I move to approve the designation of local election official representatives for the April 4th, 2017 consolidation election. Designated are Dr. John Alden and Jean Love.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Walls, second by Munda. Mrs. Conway?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell? Yes. Mr. Munda?
Yes.
Mr. Walls?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
I have 5 yes. Motion carries.
Next item is the fiscal 18 tentative staffing plan.
I provided an updated look ahead to the 17-18 school year for the board and included the anticipated reductions that we're expecting through some retirements, and also had, as we talked about a few months ago, indicated that I'd like to eliminate a position of Director of Special Education that was on our rolls and open up an administrative district position of Assistant Superintendent for Student Services, a little more holistic. But I'd like to obviously get approval for that now, because we would start probably moving on posting development of a potential job description and interviewing over the course of this year, obviously.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that a few times, so anybody have thoughts, or good, bad, or different?
We've been pretty well posted, up to date on what the plan is.
Okay.
I move to approve the proposed fiscal year 18 tentative staffing plan as presented.
Second. Walls is good.
Give one to Jim, poor Jim, come on. Roll call.
Motion by Conway, second by Walls. Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Munda?
Yes.
Mr. Walls?
Yes.
Mrs. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
I have 5 yes. Motion carries.
Next item is the 2016-17 application for recognition of schools.
Do you need me to say anything, or?
Would you like to?
Not really.
Really, it's in the board packet, it's the same thing every year.
I bet you changed the dates.
I bet I do. And we added all of the new special ed paras, so.
Wonderful. I move to approve the 2016-17 application for recognition of schools.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Anderson, second by Munda. Mr. Walls?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Munda?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
5 yes. Motion carries.
Next item is the approval of review of closed session minutes from January 19, 2016 through June 28, 2016. We're going to keep them all closed.
Good with that. I'll move to keep the executive session minutes closed for January 19th, 2016, February 9th, 2016, February 13th, 2016, March 1st, 2016, March 15th, 2016, April 12th, 2016, April 26th, 16, May 10th, 2016, May 24th, 2016, June 14th, 2016, and June 28th, 2016.
Second. Barb.
Motion by Munda, second by Conway. Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Walls?
Yes.
Mrs. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Munda?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
5 yes. Motion carries.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of payment of the bills for September 19th, 2016.
I'll move to approve the payment of bills 9, 13, 16, the amount of $1,313,723.09.
Second.
Was it motion by Munda, second by Anderson?
Correct?
Okay. Mrs. Conway?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Walls?
Yes.
Mr. Munda?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
5 yes, motion carries.
Next item is the approval of the hiring recommendations per Exhibit A.
I move to approve Exhibit A personnel recommendations number 55 through 76 as posted.
Second.
And a second.
Motion by Conway, second by Munda. Mr. Walls?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Munda?
Yes.
Mrs. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
I have 5 yes, motion carries.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from, whatever it is, August 16th.
I'll move to approve the regular meetings and executive session minutes of August 16, 2016.
Second.
So it says here the members present were everybody but me, but it doesn't say I was absent.
Okay?
That would-
I'll abstain this minute. Okay. Roll call.
We will fix that. Roll call. Motion by Munda, second by Conway. Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Walls?
Yes.
Mrs. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Munda?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Abstain.
I have 4 yes and 1 abstention. Motion carries.
Very good. That is the last item on the agenda. I know you'd like to stay longer, but I move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Anderson, second by Munda.
Correct.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Munda?
Yes.
Mr. Walls?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes, I'm sorry. I was
Aye,
listening to
yes,
something
motion
else. I
carries.
apologize. So now we can look up the judge score, please.